And we do have a pretty big update. We talked couple days now about congressional redistricting. Now, this is not the first time that this has been suggested in North Carolina. We redraw our districts every few years or so. However, this is in response to multiple other states doing this to try and combat the Republican legislature. So I know this started in Texas with them wanting to have more Republican representation. California then followed suit, trying to get more Democrats to balance that out. Now North Carolina being the third state to really jump in there. I know some other states have mentioned jumping in there, Missouri even, but we do have a big update in North Carolina. We have the maps. This is exactly what we suspected it might look like. It is a change in the eastern side of the state, so it wouldn't necessarily affect us over here in terms of who we would be voting for in the Charlotte area, in the mountains. However, I do want to point out that any congressional change to our map, any congressional divide that is different than what we have now, does affect North Carolinians all over the state and people all over the country. North Carolina did redraw their districts just a couple years ago, which already gave Republicans more of a congressional sway in Congress. So this, if it is to pass, would be another shift. It's one particular district that is kind of at the core here, which was a really, really tight race. And this would make it even tighter, if not not impossible, but pretty impossible for a Democrat to win. So I know RAL spoke with that representative. That is Representative Don Davis, who's in District 1, I believe. He is a Democrat who was already the target of pro-GOP gerrymandering a couple years ago, and so he did get reelected, but it was by a very, very slim margin. This map changes that district even more so that it would squeeze him out of it potentially even more. RAL did speak to him. They're our NBC affiliate in Raleigh. He said, quote, "Serving the hardworking families of the East is my unwavering commitment, regardless of party affiliation or the way the map is drawn. I intend to continue this work. Eastern North Carolina is my home, and our residents deserve a champion and fair representation." Now, this, of course, has not gone through yet, but we are expecting the legislature to address it on Monday. They're going to get back both the Senate and the House, and this process is kind of up in the air right now. We do know that typically when we do this, when it's scheduled that we redraw the districts, it's all of it. It's State House, State Senate districts, and U.S. Congress. This is different, though. This would just be the congressional districts. That's why it's so interesting, is that this is a direct response to what's happening in California and Texas and in the U.S. representation as a whole. I know we've spoken a couple times, Deb, to Wiley Nickel, and he was a representative who was here in the Mecklenburg County area. He's from Charlotte. He got gerrymandered out of his district and decided not to run again. So we've already seen the impacts of this. The reason that this is so significant is because the divide in Congress is so slim as it is, that the 3 seats that North Carolina went right on, that they typically may be a little more competitive or go left on, are what gave the U.S. Congress that Republican majority. Right now, of course, the Republicans have the presidency, Supreme Court majority, and they have the House and the Senate. So that is significant because there's nothing now that the Democrats have in control, and North Carolina has been a big piece of that.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Jeff Jackson also the subject? Like,
yeah.
That was the reason he had ultimately elected to run for Attorney General. Not necessarily officially, but I think he actually may have said that officially.
I think so. I'm curious
yeah.
if we might be able to pull that up. But yeah, he was a part of that as well.
Right.
And so this is not abnormal. North Carolina is seen as one of the more gerrymandered states, if not first or second, pretty historically. Ohio's also up there. And so not that this is unheard of by any means, but it is incredibly timely because the only reason that they are saying, the Republicans being Senate Pro Tem Phil Berger and Speaker Destin Hall, is in response to what they're saying as a call from President Trump. And so it's going to be interesting now to see how many states are we going to go back and forth on. I mentioned Missouri is one that is a very red state that has expressed interest in doing that. I'm sure if North Carolina goes through with it, which it looks like they are, others may follow suit. I mentioned they're going to be back in on Monday. We don't know, though, how long this process is going to take. Like I mentioned, usually when we redraw the districts, we go for all 3 of the big ones, and it takes maybe a couple weeks. This being only one, we don't know. It might be shorter. but with how much attention, it might still be as long. Who's to say? This, though, really interesting to watch. Democrats, of course, are very against this. I spoke with Representative Jordan Lopez just a couple days ago before this map was revealed. But this is kind of what we suspected, as Don Davis's district was the closest and the one that they'd already kind of tried to push him out before. Lopez said, we are going to try and see what we can do. But at this point, there isn't much that the Democrats in the state can do. This is the governor is not allowed to veto this. So if the Republicans pass this and they just need a simple majority, which they have, that's kind of that. So I'm curious to see how long this takes. I'm curious to see how long Democrats can stall, because I think that is more likely the avenue, according to Representative Lopez, that they're going to take, but they kind of understand there isn't really much to be done about this. I think people would be surprised to know that the governor cannot veto something like this, given how big of a change this is. Again, not just for, of course, here our districts don't change, but our representation, not just in North Carolina, but as a country, could shift if this does go through, Jeb. Yeah. So anything else that I haven't mentioned that you think we need to get to?
And I'll just ask some questions.
Yeah, sure.
And you may have said it as well, but just to hit back on it, what would this actually do for our congressional seats? So I know in California, it would the redistricting that has been proposed for the state of California would add 5 Democratic seats and remove 5 Republican seats. If this map, and I'll bring it up here again.
Yeah.
If this map, and you see in eastern North Carolina, and I have the map as it is right now. So look on your east, that's the right of your screen if you're looking at the screen. You see there's purple in the top, there's that like tan color.
Yeah.
That's the old map. You look in this map now, you see that purple has expanded. What do we know yet what that would actually, and I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but what that would actually be? And I'll also, while you're looking that up, I'll point out, if you look in the bottom right, there's a little tiny purple speck that they've drawn into that county, which I think is fascinating, because you always wonder what kind of research has suggested that extremely small part of the county is going to be redrawn. So that's my question, is what will this actually tangibly change?
In terms of that little piece of that county, no clue.
Right,
I got to
exactly.
be honest with you. In terms of tangibly changing, we're not necessarily doing anything as extensive as California. California is obviously a much bigger state. You're from there, you know that.
Oh, absolutely.
And so they have a lot more wiggle room. We only have 14 seats, which isn't small. It's still quite significant.
Right, absolutely.
But we're not, to my understanding, adding or changing any seat. We're just shifting it so that the purple district becomes bigger. If you can see that again, and the yellow district becomes smaller. Typically what they do is they put more of the rural counties into one that tend to go more red, or spread those out amongst, put them in other maybe leaning blue districts so that it kind of dilutes the blue a little bit. So it kind of depends on how they do it. This one would just be literally shifting one district the slightest bit, but when we're talking about 14 seats, one extra seat when we're already at such a close balance in Congress is a big deal. This would, I pulled it up, Republicans, assuming this goes through, would have a chance to win 11 out of our 14 seats, which is, I mean, we are a purple state at the end of the day. We do tend, lately especially, to lean red. Voted for Trump in the presidential election. Governor Stein won by a landslide, so he's a Democrat, so obviously there is some cross-party ballots happening. People are consciously thinking about who to vote for in these elections. And so Democrats would probably argue, who's to say that 11 out of 14 is a really accurate representation of North Carolina. That's really what the debate is here. And as I mentioned, we are already known as a very gerrymandered state.
I was going to say North Carolina, arguably the most gerrymandered state by many reports in the country. So interesting to see if that further progresses.
Something else to note, too, when we talk about gerrymandering, we often talk about racial gerrymandering. I want to note that Representative Don Davis is one of the 3 black representatives that we have in North Carolina. North Carolina, incredibly diverse state. And so that would be significant for our representatives to switch up in terms of racial representation as well. Not just in terms of when we talk about racial gerrymandering, we're not just talking about how the representatives look, we're talking about maybe the black vote getting diluted by black communities getting split up and put into different districts. We've seen that not just in North Carolina, but historically, of course. And so that's something to take note of as well. I know that's going to be a discussion. Jordan Lopez, representative from Mecklenburg County, he did speak about, he says, again, he's a Democrat, so he's against this, but he said this dilutes the power of the vote every time we split up districts into little pieces that don't really make sense. Mecklenburg County is kind of a chunk that, makes sense. You can see the yellow dot there. That is, that's Charlotte. That makes a little bit more sense. But some of these districts, you're like, these people over here in the purple have never spoken to someone on the other side of that district. And so something to think about as well is will these, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, will people in this district be accurately represented by such a big chunk? As I said, 14 representatives, so not everyone's going to get as much say. I know those big areas, not all of them are so populated, but over there you got some, bigger cities on the coast that do have quite a bit of different needs than some of these more inland counties would need. And so it definitely gets a little bit weird there when we not just talk about party representation, but we're looking at coastal representation versus, that looks like it's almost all the way to Greensboro. So definitely some things to think about as well. Discussions, I know on Monday are going to be very heated, and I expect them to, while I don't know how long this will take to pass, I expect the Democrats to put up quite a stink.